Take your Bibles, turn to the book of Luke, chapter number 15. Luke, chapter 15. The title of the message this morning is Question. What put the boy in the pig pen? What put the boy in the pig pen? Luke, chapter number 15. We're only going to read the first half of this particular parable. The reason we're only going to read the half of it is because the point of the parable is to tell us what got the boy out of the pig pen. Jesus gives the parable, and the answer to the question, the truth behind the parable is, if you want to get a boy out of the pig pen, you get him back to Jesus Christ. That's the only way to get a boy completely out of the pig pen. Now, you might get him out of drugs, you might get him out of jail, you might get him out of adultery, but to get him completely out of the pig pen, there's only one solution. If you want to get somebody out of the pig pen, you got to get them to Jesus Christ. But that's not what I'm going to preach on. I'm not going to preach on getting the boy out of the pig pen. The question this morning, the title of the message is, what put the boy into the pig pen? Start reading Luke chapter number 15, verse number 11. And he, Jesus, said, a certain man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. And he divideth unto them his living. And not many days after, the younger gathered all together and took his journey into a far country, and there wasted his substance with riotous living. And when he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine in that land, and he began to be in want. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed the swine. And he would fain have filled his belly with the husk that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. We're leaving the boy where we're preaching him to today. We're preaching him to the pig pen, and we're leaving him in the pig pen. What put the boy in the pig pen? Most of what I'm going to preach to you this morning is actually going to be conjecture. The reason why is because the parable doesn't tell us what put the boy in the pig pen. However, the Bible itself gives us quite a few notions about what does put people into the pig pen. I'm afraid this morning that a lot of parents don't understand the danger of the pig pen. I'm afraid we don't understand what the danger is to our kids. We don't understand even what the danger of the pig pen is to ourselves. As parents, quite often, I think sometimes quite ignorantly, we are actually pointing our children towards the pig pen. And then again, quite often, we ourselves, because we're adults and because we think we can, we tend to dance all around the lip of the pig pen. We forget, I believe, that it's a slippery, mucky place, and that at any point we could lose our footing and we ourselves could wind up in the midst of the pig pen. But even if we don't, even if we dance all of our lives around the edge of the pig pen, let's face it, if you're dancing around a pig pen, you're going to get the pig mud all over you. So no matter how you look at it, it's not good for the parents to be anywhere near the pig pen. But by being near the pig pen, I think we're directing our kids to the pig pen. However, not only do I think there's a problem with parents not realizing the danger of the pig pen, I think there's a problem with kids not realizing the danger of the pig pen. In our society today, we're very good at pointing to somebody else and saying it's their fault. You need to understand, if you're a young person, it really doesn't matter what your parents do or what they don't do. It doesn't matter what they say or don't say. It doesn't matter what they think or don't think. It doesn't matter what they are or aren't. The bottom line is, if you wind up in the pig pen, you're the ones in the pig pen. It's your responsibility. It was done by your choices. And it's your fault if you ever wind up inside the pig pen. But this morning, what I'd like to preach on for a little while is what put the boy in the pig pen. I'd like to say I'm going to get finished with the message. I'm not quite sure that I will. It's hard for me to stop before I finish. That's the reason sometimes I get long-winded. If I've got a message, I want to deliver the whole message. Delivering 2/3 of it just kind of cuts me off short, and I don't rest well the rest of the day. But I'll preach as long as I feel comfortable preaching, and then at some point I'll stop. But please understand, it's important that we understand what put the boy inside the pig pen. We'll not use this Bible passage, so I'm going to invite you right now to turn with me to the book of Proverbs, chapter number 30. Remember what we've read, but in Proverbs chapter number 30, I think we can see one of the first things that can put the boy in the pig pen, and I think probably did put this boy in the pig pen. I'll give it to you in a point. First point is, what put the boy in the pig pen? Well, what we are could put the boy in the pig pen. What we are could put the boy in the pig pen. Now understand, what we just read was a parable. That means it's a made-up story. A parable is a made-up story. When Jesus spoke in parables, he made up stories. We call them earthly stories with spiritual meanings, but there wasn't a real boy. He wasn't talking about a real boy. Now, no doubt there's millions of real boys that have gone into the pig pen, probably for the same reason this boy went into the pig pen, but I can't really speak specifically about what put that boy into that pig pen because he wasn't a real boy. However, the Bible does tell us some things that have put people inside pig pens. And the first one, I believe, is found in the book of Proverbs, chapter number 30. Pick up reading with me, if you would, at verse number 8. This is one of the wisest men that have ever lived on the face of the earth, second wisest man that's ever lived on the face of the earth, Jesus being the first. And he writes, verse number 8, "Remove from me vanity and lies. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with food convenient for me, lest I be full and deny thee and say, Who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and take the name of my God in vain." This is Solomon, and he's writing. He says, I don't need too much and I don't need too little. If I get too much, I might actually become vain and begin to deny the Lord my God. If I've got too little, I might steal and wind up doing wrong against the name of the Lord my God. What kind of a person is he describing here? Two types, actually. He's describing two types of person that might wind up in the pig pen. The first one is the wealthy person. The wealthy person. What put this boy in the pig pen? Well, we don't know. He's not a real boy. But as you read the parable, you'll have to conclude he was a wealthy boy. Now listen to me real careful. I'm not against wealth. If God gives you wealth, riches, and abundance, and you get it righteously and you use it righteously, then it's a gift from God and you've just been blessed with a gift. Now, I'm not against wealth, but you need to understand that wealthy people need to learn some lessons that poor people and working people don't necessarily have to learn. Now, we working people and poor people, we have to learn our own set of lessons. However, just because you're wealthy doesn't mean you're exempt from the pig pen. There's lessons that you need to learn, or else you and yours will be in the pig pen just as surely as the poor and the working class folks can be in the pig pen. You say, preacher, what kind of lessons? Well, I can give you just a couple. Not being a wealthy person, I don't know them all, but I do know that working people know the value of their job, so they work to protect it. And I've run across some wealthy people that did not know the value of integrity, and they did not work to protect that. You see, that's something that they have to work a little bit harder to protect because they've got so much wealth, they might not think about the importance of their integrity. And then again, most working people, really working people, know they have to be careful of extravagance. They can't spend too much because they'll go into debt and can't pay the bill. But you know, a wealthy person has to learn the dangers of excess. And if they don't learn the dangers of excess, they could well wind up in the pig pen. And then again, there's the person who's working. He has to work to eat. The wealthy person, he has to work to stay away from temptation. And then again, the poor person, he knows that at some point in his life he's not going to be able to work, so he's got to work to save. A wealthy person doesn't have to worry about that. He has to work to share because he's got an abundance. And if he doesn't learn how to share of the abundance that he's got, he'll wind up being a miserable hoarder all the days of his life. I'm just telling you, most of us who are the working, and maybe some of us who are the poor, we look around and we say, man, I'd like to be the wealthy, but I got news for you. You've never been wealthy. You don't know what burdens they carry. You don't know what temptations they fight, and you don't know what demons they wrestle with. I read an article this past week. Didn't read the whole article, wasn't that interested, but it was a man who won, I think it was $111 million. And he says, I wish I had never bought the ticket. Now, if you won $111 million, you're probably thinking to yourself, I'd never say that, but I've got news for you. There are problems with being wealthy that people who aren't wealthy just don't understand. Isn't it interesting how many movie stars' kids wind up in rehab, wind up suicidal, wind up committing atrocities against themselves and against others? Isn't it amazing how many politicians' kids are corrupt? Isn't it amazing how many wealthy people have kids in the pig pens
how many wealthy people themselves are inside of the pig pen. See, wealthy people have some problems. They've got too much of some things. What kind of things? Well, they got too much money. They got more money than they know what to do with. And because they've got so much money, they just get accustomed to buying and selling whatever it is they want. They get this notion in their head, well, whatever I want, I can just buy it. Let me tell you, it's still true. Some things cannot be bought with money. I don't care what store you go to, and I don't care how much money you've got. Some things can't be bought with money. Some things have to be homegrown. Some things have to be homegrown. Character has to be homegrown. To have honor, honesty, to have faith, loyalty, duty, to be able to sacrifice, to have goodness. These are things that have to be sown in the life of a human being. Somebody has to plant the seed for this kind of character. Then somebody's got to water that seed, and somebody's got to cultivate that seed. And sooner or later, somebody's got to harvest the fruit from that kind of seed and put it in a prominent place of display in the life of that child or that adult, so that that child and that adult lives a good life, even though they may be a wealthy person. I'm going to tell you a secret. Daycares don't plant those kind of seeds. Schools don't plant those kind of seeds. Colleges and universities don't plant those kind of seeds. Babysitters and even nannies don't plant those kind of seeds. It takes good, loving parents to plant those kind of seeds. And it don't matter how much money you've got, you can't buy that kind of a character. And that's the kind of character that keeps you out of the pig pen. Not having that kind of a character is the character that directs you into the pig pen. They got too much. Too much what? Well, they got too much money. They got too much time. Too much time. What's that old adage? An idle mind is the devil's workshop. Been around for 100 years at least, and it's still as true today as it ever was. One of the many things that I believe we let our government do that we should not have let our government do was to outlaw children working in child labor. Now, don't get me wrong. I am against child slavery. I don't think children ought to be forced to work 8, 10, 12, but I think it's a terrible injustice against our kids that kids under 16, 17, and 18 years of age cannot go out and get a job. They said they were doing it for our own good. Always be careful when the government says they're doing something for our own good. You see, kids have to learn how to work. And they don't learn how to work when they're 18, 19, and 20. If they haven't begun to work by the time they're 18, 19, and 20, you can just about write them off. They may connive for the rest of their life. They may get by for the rest of their life. But for people to work, they have to learn how to work when they're young. They have to learn how to do the jobs, and they also have to learn how to appreciate what they get. And you don't appreciate what you've got when other people are taking it from you or giving it to you. Work is an important thing that people need to use and be a part of. But the wealthy have a problem. They've got too much time. And because they've got too much time, they tend to be directed towards the pig pen. They've got too much. Wealthy, they've got too much money. They've got too much time. They've got too many acquaintances. Too many acquaintances. Now, I'm not saying too many friends. You can't have too many friends. If you'll go through your whole life and you've got more than a handful of friends at a time, you are a rich individual. Some people will go through their whole life and they won't have a handful of friends their whole life. I'm not talking about having too many friends. I'm talking about wealthy people have too many acquaintances. You realize in the world that we're living in today, if you're a city dude, none of you are, okay, you're out here in the Hicks, but if you were city dudes, you could live on a block in a big city. Your kids could have anywhere from, 15, 20 playmates, maybe to 100 their own age, or close to 15 to 100 acquaintances just on one city block. Well, we don't have that problem out in Green Pond. We don't even have a city block, so we don't have that many people on a city block, but we do send our kids to city schools. And in city schools, they might have anywhere from 15 to 30 in their class. They might have anywhere from a couple of dozen to maybe a couple of thousand kids that they become acquainted with. Too many acquaintances. Not necessarily too many friends, too many acquaintances. And now we've got this new thing Well, it's not new anymore. Been around about 20 years. Social media. Nowadays, you can be a part of a gigantic mass. Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, Snapchat. I mean, they've got all kinds of little devices and apps that you can make your children part of a big herd. They can be a part of the masses. Most of those young folks, they'll never ever see, and that's probably the best thing for them. But still, they want the approval of those folks in their group, in their mass, in their herd. And it's always true that when you got a herd mentality, you've got some joker there who wants to get his kicks and his thrills by getting other people to jump through his hoops. And he'll do almost anything to get his following. You do understand where herds go. Herds, more times than not, are driven towards the pig pens. Now you're saying to yourself, well, preacher, you sure are spending a whole lot of time talking about Solomon's first thing. Maybe his wealth drove him into the pig pen. We're not wealthy people. I would argue with you. I would say that you indeed are some of the wealthiest people that this world has ever seen. See, we've got a false notion about poverty. We think if we have to work for a living, we're poor. Friend, just because you work for a living, you're not poor. We think because we don't have the newest car, the newest clothes, the finest cell phone, that somehow we're in poverty. You're not in poverty because you hadn't got all the nice. Just because you don't have a Lear jet and can't jump on it and hop from one country to the next, you're not poor. Understand what poor is. Poor is somebody who hasn't got food in his stomach. Poor is somebody who hasn't got clothes on his back. Poor is somebody who hasn't got a roof over his head. Truth of the matter is, we are still probably the second richest generation that this world has ever seen. Only foreshadowed by maybe my parents and maybe your grandparents. We are still some of the richest people in the world. I don't know if you know it or not. Your kids are some of the richest kids in the world. They're running with some of the richest kids in the world. Most kids, by the time they're 16, they get their own car. They don't work for it. They didn't spend these last 3 months out in the heat from daylight to dark, working 8, 10, 12 hours a day, maybe picking cotton. I know that's a racist term nowadays, but they didn't pick cotton. They didn't plow in the fields. They didn't work at the convenience stores. But most of them sat at the house. They had to sit at the house. Government won't let them go get a job. Most of them aren't thinking about getting after-school jobs. They won't let them get after-school jobs. Truth of the matter is, they're living off of the abundance of the wealth of moms and dads. They've got their own TV sets. They got their own cell phones. They got their own access to internet, and most kids today have their own stash of cash. They can spend it any way they want to, and nobody will ever know what they spent it on. We are living amongst a wealthy generation. Our kids are in the herd with the wealthy folks. And it's possible that what put this boy in the pig pen was the wealth of mom and dad. Remember what he did? Went to his dad. Dad, give me my inheritance now. And the Bible says he went out, and with riotous living, he spent all the substance that he had. The Bible doesn't tell us it was his wealth that drove him into the pig pen. But I'm going to tell you, it was a mitigating factor at the very least. And if there's ever been a generation that needs to understand the danger of wealth, it's this generation. It's this generation. Young people, you are so blessed. You are. I'm not going to get no amens today, but I'm going to say it. You are a blessed generation. Not to have had to work, not to have had to go out in the sun and sweat and labor to receive the bounty. Maybe it's not the newest car. Maybe it's 20 years old, but bless God, it gets you where you need to go, and it's a reliable piece of transportation. Maybe you don't have the fanciest cell phone, but you've got nice things, nice clothes. You get to have your own TV set, maybe your own private room, and maybe nowadays your own private bathroom. You've got almost everything that kings would have desired to have had 1,000 years ago, and you've got it. You live with an air-conditioned home. You've got bountiful food on the table. You've got a refrigerator full of snacks. You've got cabinets full of goods. You are a wealthy person. You need to understand there's a danger in your life. The danger is you might get swept up in the herd. You might find yourself in the pig pen because the Bible says that the wealth of a person can direct them towards the pig pen. But that's not the only thing that Solomon mentions there in Proverbs chapter 30. In verse number 9, he mentions, don't give me too much, but he also says, don't make me too poor. Lest I begin to steal and virtually blaspheme the name of the Lord. Now again, I'm not thinking there's very many in our fellowship that would fit what I would call poor. There are no doubt some who have less than others. But the poorest Americans today are by far richer than the majority of people living on this planet. We are a wealthy nation. But I could understand where if somebody didn't have enough food on their table, where they might get angry at their parents, might tend to be a little bit rebellious to mom and dad. I could understand why they might get a little bit angry towards God and say, God, why did you give me this life? I mean, I see all these folks over here and they walk past me and they've got some bed to lay their head on at night. They've got some nice clothes to put on. They've got nice cars. Lord, I've got nothing. I'm sleeping under a bridge someplace. I'm covering up with a box that I found. I could see why somebody like that might get angry at God. That's the reason we as parents want to do our very best to help our kids to learn the importance of work, the value of education, the importance of making some wise decisions, the importance of being grateful for the small things that you've got, for learning how to save and how to build on what you've got to make bigger and better. Not to make the things the God of your life, but to be able to take whatever life has given you, whatever God has given you, and to use where you are and what you are to become more for God than you started out with. Somewhere we've lost the challenge of life. We've lost the challenge. The challenge is to take what God has given me and be a better person throughout my life with it. Somewhere we've had such an abundance of so much, we think it's our right to have it and then to squander it. There's a danger in what we are. What put the boy in the pig pen? Maybe it's what he was, wealthy. Maybe it's what we are, poor. Number one, what put the boy in the pig pen? What he was might have put him in the pig pen. Number two, what put the boy in the pig pen? Maybe where he was. Where he was. Now again, I can't tell you what actually put that boy in the pig. He's not a real boy, okay? It's like Pinocchio. He's a make-believe story. He's not really there. But I can tell you that the Bible is very clear. Where we are can contribute to putting us in the pig pen. You take your Bible, go to the book of Genesis. You go to Genesis chapter number 13. While you're going there, I'm going to read to you Psalm chapter 1. You're going to Genesis 13. I'm going to read Psalm 1:1. Psalm 1:1 says, Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. Now listen again to what he said. Blessed is the man that walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, that stands not in the way of sinners, that sits not in the seat of the scorner. You know what those three things have in mind, or have in common? They're all locations. They're all locations. Blessed is the man who's not walking among the ungodly, that's not sitting among the sinners, that's not sitting among the scornful. What he's saying is where you're at can determine the outcome of your life. If you're walking with the ungodly, if you're standing with the sinners, if you're sitting with the scornful, you just might be in a place that's ultimately going to put you in the pig pen. That's just one Bible passage. I ask you to turn to what I think is probably the premier Bible passage that shows us the danger of where we are. It's the story of Lot. Pick up reading at verse number 10. Genesis 13:10. And Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like unto the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. Get verse number 11. Then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan. And Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves the one from the other. Now, we're jumping in the middle of the story. Can't preach the whole story, but Abraham and Lot are separating company. Lot's the uncle, Abraham's the uncle, Lot's the nephew. They've got so much goods that they can't stay in one place together, so they're going to go different directions. Abraham says, Lot, you pick whichever direction you want to go, and that'll be your location, and I'll take whatever direction you don't want. So Lot picks his direction. Verse number 11 says he chose the plain of Jordan. This is where he's at. We're talking about what sent the boy to the pig pen. Sometimes it can be where you are. Where's he at? He's at the plain of Jordan. Now look down to verse number 12, the latter part of the verse. Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain and pitched his tent towards Sodom. Now he started off in the plain of Jordan. But by verse number 12, he's in the cities of Jordan. But that's not nearly as dangerous as that other phrase. And he pitched his tent toward Sodom. That means he pitched his tent so that his front door, through his front door, he could see Sodom. Now look down at chapter 14, verse number 12. Chapter 14, verse number 12. Chapter 14, verse number 12. And they took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom. Who dwelt in Sodom. Are you seeing a progression there? You should be. Abraham says, you pick whatever direction you want to go. You pick the direction you want to go. And Lot said, I'll just take this plain. It's the plain of Jordan. I'll just take this nice fertile plain. But it's not long. Very next verse, he's not in the plain anymore. He's in the cities. And he's not just in the cities, but he's got the flap of his tent pointed towards the most wicked heathenistic city in the entire land. And then by the time we get to chapter number 14, he's not just with his tent pointed towards that city, he's living inside that city. If you know of anybody that wound up in the pig pen, let's just say Lot wound up in the pig pen. He winds up in the most ungodly city that the world has ever seen. The only individual city that I know of, that was so bad that God sent angels from heaven to check it out, to take Lot and his family out of that city, and then destroyed that one city with fire and with brimstone. I don't know of another city on the entire face of the earth and all the history of mankind that God was ever so riled at that he did that act to. If anybody could ever be said to have danced on the edge of the the pig pen and slipped on the mud, it'd be Lot. Grown adult? Absolutely. Knew better? Absolutely. But he thought he could dance on the edge of the pig pen, and he slid and he fell inside. Why? Because of where he was. Now listen to me real careful. The world you and I are listening has changed a lot. It's changed mega times since I was a kid growing up in it. But it's changed in the last 2 years. It's changed drastically in the last 2 years. It's now it's a devolving situation. So that literally every single day, it's changing for the worse. Listen, there ain't nobody who's got a tent whose door is not pitched towards Sodom today. It don't matter where you put your tent. It don't matter which direction you point your door. I'm telling you, it's pointed towards Sodom. Everybody's tent is pointed towards Sodom today. It's just where we are. You need to understand, where we are can cause our kids and even ourselves to wind up in the pig pen. Now, good news, there's a solution. God gave us a solution in His Bible. It's been there all along. It's actually commanded to the children of God, but most of them don't like to listen to it. Here's the solution. It's found in 2 Corinthians 6:17. Wherefore come out from among them, and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you. You know, the solution to living in a wicked world and not being sucked into the pig pen is just separate yourself from the wicked world. Your tent may still be on the same parcel of ground. Your flat may be still pointed towards the same wicked cities, but you draw a line of righteousness between you and the rest of this world, and you keep that line between you and the world that you live in. It's called separation. I use that word. I still use that word. I've been using it for 40 years, but I still use that word. Most every time I use it, I feel inclined to say, I know most folks don't like to hear that word, but it's the only solution for the world that you're living in today. You're going to have to draw a line on the ground that separates you from this wicked world, or else where you are will cause you to wind up in the pig pen. Now, there's two hardships. There's two hardships, especially for kids, when somebody draws that line on the ground. Two hardships. Number one, sooner or later, they're going to meet somebody who's on the other side, and they're going to feel sorry for the person that's on the other side. They're going to come across somebody who's got a different lifestyle, somebody who believes different, has a different philosophy, who thinks wrong is right and right is wrong, and they're going to get attached to them emotionally, and they're going to say to themselves, I sure hate that you're on the wrong side of this line. And it's going to want to make them erase the line. Strange. It never seems to dawn on anybody to invite the person on the wrong side of the line to get on the right side of the line. I don't know why we don't think along those lines. Hey, you're on the wrong side of the line. The solution here is don't erase the line. The solution is, why don't you come from that side of the line and get on this side of the line? But more times than not, what kids will do, and even what parents will do, is they'll erase the line. Now listen to me. There's three things, parents, you need to do for your kids when they get their heart attached to somebody that's on the wrong side of the line. Three things. Number one, you need to tell them it's God that draws the line. It's God that draws the line. Now, if this is just a line that you put on the ground for your own personal preferences, you can't tell them that. If you picked as an arbitrary time, bedtime at 8 o'clock, not a bad idea. If you pick that, that's fine. Your mom, your dad, you can write that as if it's carved in stone, and you can even tell them Moses had a part with that. But you can't tell them that's what God said, because God didn't say that. But what you want to do is you want to have a line of righteousness that goes between you and a wicked world where God drew the line. And then you need to be able to tell your kids, we can't erase that line. It's not our line to erase. God drew that line. Second thing you need to tell them, I'm talking about you now as a parent. Maybe you need to tell yourself this. Maybe you need to get in the mirror and tell yourself this, because maybe it's you that's wrestling over this. Maybe you need to get in the mirror and look at yourself and say, listen, I didn't put that line there, God did. But I'm really thinking about what we need to do for our kids now, because they've gotten their heart attached, and they're feeling sorry for somebody on the wrong side of the line. We need to tell them, we didn't put it there, God put it there. And number two, we need to tell them this. Although it may not seem like it right now, the reason God put that line there was for our good and not for our harm. The God in heaven is not a mean God. He's not a mean God. Where God drew his lines at, he put them there for his glory and for our good. And then number three, you need to tell your kids, we're not erasing the line. We're not. Moms and dads, don't you help your kids to pole vault over that line. Don't you help your kids to dig a tunnel up underneath that line. If you're going to do anything, you be the home plate umpire. You know what the home plate umpire does? He's got a brush in his back pocket. And anytime the line starts to get clouded, he pulls that brush out and he bends over and he sweeps that thing down. He wants to make sure the line is always visible. If you're a mom, if you're a dad, if you're the husband of a home, what you need to have is a holy brush, and you need to knock the dust and the dirt off that line, because that's not our line. That's God's line. I understand it creates a hardship for the folks that's on the wrong side of the line, but they can always come to the right side of the line. There's two hardships. There's two hardships. Number one is you get to feeling sorry for the folks on the other side of the line. Second hardship is it's really kind of lonely, especially for kids. It's really kind of lonely to be on the right side of the line. Let's face it, most of the world's not on the right side of the line. Be honest. In your typical church, most of your members aren't even on the right side of the line. The world that we live in, most everybody's on the wrong side of the line. And you have to acknowledge. And if you've got a little child and you're trying to teach that child to stay on the right side of the line, there's no sense in lying to them. You might as well tell them, hey, I know most of your friends are on the wrong side of the line. And I know it looks awful good over there. It looks like they're having some fun, and there's pleasure, and there's activities, and there's companionship, and there's encouragement. And boy, it sure looks great. And if you don't acknowledge the truth, they're not going to believe you anyway. And that is the way it looks. It looks like the world in their sinful ways is just having a whirl of a time. But then you need to tell them all those things. That's just the bait on the hook. And as soon as you bite that hook, you'll find out what the world's going to do is it's going to reel you down into the pig pen. I'll tell you another secret about this old world. It don't give, it takes. World's just like the devil. It don't give, it takes. And unless one of these days you want to walk away from your kids and see their life crumbled and ruined and them covered with mud, thrashing about in mud pit, you better make sure you don't move that line. What put the boy in the pig pen? Don't know. He's not a real boy. Could have been what he was. Could have been where he was. Number 3, it can be when he was. Let me change that. It can be when we are. Because we're living in some unique times. My time's probably already gone. I haven't looked lately. But let me just read to you a Bible verse. 1 John chapter 2, verse number 18. Little children, it is the last time. And as you have heard that Antichrist shall come, even now are there many Antichrists, whereby we know that it is the last time. That verse has caused confusion by some people. I say, well, here's John, who lived 2,000 years ago, and he's telling us we're in the last times. Well, Jesus hadn't come back yet, therefore the whole Bible must be a fake. Well, the fact that we've been living in the last times for 2,000 years doesn't mean that John was wrong. See, John knew God's mind, and he knew God's plan. He knew that one of the last major events to happen on God's calendar was he was going to send the sacrifice for man's sins. That was Jesus Christ. And so he knew that once Jesus Christ came and died for mankind, that really we were at, or at least near, the end of God's big picture, of God's long timetable. And he's right. We've been living in the last times for 2,000 years. But I'm here to tell you today, we're living in the last of the last times. I'm not going to preach on it. I just preached a message along these lines 2 weeks ago. But let me give you seven signs, if you will, please. 7 biblical reasons why I think we're living in the last of the last times. Not going to preach them. Let me just give them to you. Number 1, natural affection has dwindled. Matthew 24:12. Natural affection has dwindled. Gonna have to stop there for a minute. Like, gonna have to. Natural affection. Most people think natural affection dwindling is abortion. It is. Most people think natural affection is abandonment, having kids and then walking off and leaving them. It is. Most people think loss of natural affection is husbands abandoning their wives, wives stepping out on their husbands, being unfaithful. It is. But what you need to understand is natural affection dwindling is even when mom and dad stay in the same home and stay together, but will not sacrifice their lives and themselves for their kids. Amen, preacher. When we're to the place where we think we've had them and we've done our duty to them, we're living in a time of mass herds. I keep coming back to masses. Mass education, mass communication, mass socialization, mass entertainment, mass everything, mass. If there's ever been a day when you need to get your kids out of the herd, it's this day. If there's anything that's good that's come out of the COVID is more people are homeschooling than they've ever homeschooled before. I looked it up statistically, homeschooling doubled last year. And I got a feeling the way they're starting out this year, it's going to increase again this year. Last year, somewhere around 9% of the American kids were homeschooled. That's more than's ever been home. That's doubled what it was in 2019. Unfortunately, most of the homeschoolers last year, the new homeschoolers, they took the public education material and brought it home and taught it online. You really didn't help a whole lot. Now, I'm not trying to be hurtful. I really am not. Sometimes it seems like I am, but I'm not trying to be hurtful. But I'm going to tell you, we got good people in public education. We do. We've still got good teachers. We've still got good principals. But our public education system today is trying to make every child that goes through it a humanist, an agnostic, and a socialist. And what you need to do is you need to chunk the public school system, and you need to chunk their curriculum, and you need to get your kids out of the herd, and you need to start treating them, teaching them like an individual. Parents right now are saying, I would if I could. I can't afford to. You can't afford to because you went out and bought too much stuff on credit. Amen. Not willing to sacrifice that nice new house. Not willing to sacrifice that nice new car. Not willing to sacrifice all those nice trips. If you don't take 2 trips a month, you feel like you're poor. I'm telling you, you can get by with a whole lot less. But we're going through a biblical time period. Lack of natural affection. We're real good at pointing at the lost world and saying they ain't got none. I'm telling you, I got a feeling God's looking down from heaven. He's pointing at us, saying, you ain't got much neither. What are the signs of the end time? Well, one is lack of natural affection. Matthew chapter number 24, verse number 12. Number 2, moral and spiritual behavior devolving. Romans chapter 1, verses 28 through 32. Demonism arising. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse number 1. The church compromising truth. 2 Thessalonians 2:3. Technology's great advancements. Revelation 11:9. Revelation 13:15 through 17. The rise of a 10-nation world power. Hasn't happened yet, but I'm feeling it's going to happen very soon. Daniel's chapter 2:7. Revelation chapter 12, 13, and 17. And we're moving, in my opinion, closer and closer to the conditions that will begin the tribulation. Bible describes in Romans chapter number 6, great war, great famine, and great death. We are living at a bad time. We are living in the last of the last days. Do you understand? Rise of demonism. Lack of affection and devotion. We're having kids, and we're sending them out into a demonic world. And we're really not doing very much to prepare them and protect them. What's going to happen? They're going to wind up in the pig pen. There's things that I want to say that I don't say because I don't really want to hurt your feelings. But what we're doing ain't working. There's some folks, you're raising your grandkids. But you're raising your grandkids the same way you raised your kids. And they didn't turn out so good, or you wouldn't be raising your grandkids. If you keep doing what you have been doing, you're going to keep getting what you have been getting. We're raising kids that are stuck in the pig pen. I mean, they're drug addicts. They're alcoholics. They're sexual deviants. They won't work. They won't look after their own. They're more like animals. They mate over here for a while, and they mate over here, and they make a bed over here for a while. We're living in a time where the world has become the pig pen. Why? Maybe it's because of what we are. Maybe it's because of where we are. Maybe it's because of when we are. But there's one thing I know. I don't want to wind up in the pig pen. And I don't want my kids to wind up in the pig pen. It was some 40 years ago when we made the decision, and we were some of the first, our generation was some of the first, made the decision we'd homeschool our kids. And I can remember to this day the good people in the churches that laughed at us and said, you'll mess those kids up. They won't know how to be social. They won't know how to interact. You turn them loose in this world, and they'll wind up succumbing to all the temptations because they've been shielded all their life. I'm going to tell you, I saw a problem with this world 40 years ago. I'm really seeing a problem with it now. And if you're not, might be Because you're already in the pig pen. What put the boy in the pig pen? The Bible doesn't tell us. But I don't want to wind up there. I don't want my kids to wind up there. And I don't want my grandkids to wind up there. Good news. The rest of the parable tells us how to get them out. Get them back to the Father. Get them back to Jesus Christ. He is and always has been the only solution for this world. If you want to get out of the pig pen, come to Jesus Christ. Would you bow your head? Father, I thank you for the opportunity to preach. I thank you for the people's attention. I wish there had been more here. I hope that nobody's mad because they think I've singled them out. Lord, I'd have no idea who's going to be here today. I've just tried my best to follow what you would have me to follow. Lord, the Word of God hits somebody between the eyes. It's not me shooting the gun. It's got to be you. So God, you lead, you guide, you direct. Help us who are grandparents and parents and even great-great-grandparents. Help us to find ways to help our kids and our grandkids and our great-grands. Lord, this is the most difficult age, perhaps since the days of Noah. Help us, God, that we might be more for Jesus, that we might be the bright and shining light on the hilltop, that we might show them there's a God that loves them, that will save them, that will cleanse them, that will use them. Help us to demonstrate to them that this world has nothing to hold their attention. Lord, there's eternal things, better things. God, help us to fix our eyes on you so that they can see what it's like